I'm David Hepworth. Thanks for clicking this Word in Your Ear podcast, videocast, thing for which there is no name. Mark Ellen and I have been creating in this line since 2007. And if any of it has met with your approval, then please click to subscribe because it helps. Leave a comment because we like to hear from you, and maybe even consider becoming a Patreon supporter because then, well, you'll be one of us. Visit patreon.com/wordinyourear for details.
You're listening to a podcast from The Word.
So, Mark, yesterday was Saturday, and May the 24th, and that was Bob Dylan's birthday, wasn't it, Mark?
84th birthday.
You sent him a card?
Well, we never get a response, but we always do. There's usually a little gathering. We didn't do much yesterday, but there's usually a little gathering down at my wife's allotment with a cake. It's got to be done.
So, meanwhile, Bob himself was not taking the day off. He was playing, get this, Mark, the Cascades Amphitheatre, Ridgefield in Washington State, which struck me as the absolute archetypal kind of venue Bob Dylan seems to have played for the last 25 years or something. You know what I mean? I think they're what's called in the United States secondary markets. You know, so it's not Chicago, it's not Los Angeles or whatever. It's somewhere kind of more suburban, you know. And he was
support, wasn't he?
He was supporting.
But the headline, I think, was Willie Nelson.
Willie Nelson, I think it's called the Outlaws Tour.
Yeah.
So if Bob Dylan was 84, how old is Willie Nelson, Mark?
Oh, my Lord, 92, what do you think?
He is 92.
I'm guessing, is that right?
92 years old, which is, you know, that is quite something for if people to turn up to see a gig where the support act is 84. And
the spring chicken bounces on stage. I'll get the old timer on there.
Yeah.
And have you bought your folding chairs?
And the headline is 92. But there they are, still doing it. It's extraordinary. I was looking at the Bob Dylan set list, and I think he started with "Gotta Serve Somebody," which still seems the most provocative way you can start a Bob Dylan show, doesn't it? Really, you know. And he played a Charlie Rich song, and he played a Bobby Bland song, I think. But
he didn't play Chimes of Freedom, right?
He didn't play Chimes of Freedom, you know, which is interesting because that's probably the most talked about Bob Dylan song this week, isn't it? Because it's the thing that Bruce Springsteen's been featuring on his European tour. Bruce Springsteen has done this before. I think he did it about 20 years ago, or whenever the Amnesty tour was, all those years ago. And I think he was probably inspired, like many of us, because it was a Bob Dylan song that was covered by the Byrds. It was on their second album, I think it was, wasn't it? And so he's taken to that again. And it struck me, I was looking at the lyrics of Chimes of Freedom, 1964, another side of Bob Dylan. And I suppose one of the last of his apparent protest songs. But is it potentially, is it the most verbose song Bob Dylan ever wrote? Is it when he reached peak wordage, you know, with that song? It's absolutely extraordinary.
Remind me of a couple of lines.
Well, okay, I'll start at the beginning. Far between sundown's finish and midnight's broken toll, we ducked inside the doorway, thunder crashing. As majestic bells of bolts struck shadows in the sound, seeming to be the chimes of freedom flashing for the warriors whose strength is not to fight, flashing for the refugees on the unarmed road of flight, and for each and every underdog soldier in the night as we gazed upon the chimes of freedom flashing. I can remember hearing that in 1964.
Pretty rich stuff, isn't it?
It was it's very rich
That's
stuff.
Cheesecake.
It climaxes at the end of, you know, what is it? About 6 verses. And, you know, it climaxes with for the countless confused, and he sings it, countless confused, accused, misused, strung out ones and worse, and for every hung-up person in the whole wide universe, as we gaze upon the chimes of freedom.
It's bigger and bigger and bigger.
Does.
It just
it
builds
does.
and builds, as if each verse he's trying to outdo himself.
It really is.
How can I top that?
I can never square that song or any of those songs with the pictures you used to see of Bob Dylan sitting at a typewriter, typing out the lyrics of the
With
songs.
a cigarette beside him, a glass of red wine, tapping away with 2 fingers. That's
and
right.
I always used to think, well, these when you hear him sing these songs, you always got the feeling that he composed it over a guitar while singing it, while trying to sing it. You know what I mean? Rather than just a bunch of words as if they're a long poem. Side note on this: what is the band? Who is the band that got their name from a lyric of part of Chimes of Freedom?
Okay. Well, I have heard of them.
Oh well, they're long gone. But anyway, Starry-Eyed and Laughing.
Of course, Starry-Eyed and Laughing.
Starry-Eyed and Laughing.
Yes.
Who were a kind of Birds. I wouldn't hesitate to say tribute act. The mid-70s, made a couple of albums on CBS, and their gimmick, if you like, was that they sounded like Birds, and they were called Starry-Eyed and Laughing.
There's so many of those ones. There was a group called Ghost of Electricity.
Oh, yes.
There are millions,
Yes, well, it's like we've often remarked in the past that if you're looking for a name for your band, just go through the lyrics of a Steely Dan song, and there will be one there.
Well, when we were putting together the first issue of Mojo, I can remember whenever that was in the early 90s, we were trying to think of a headline for the news section. And we came up with, you came up with 20 pounds of headlines.
I don't think it was me. It's a very good, I think it might have been Paul Denoyer, actually. I think it might have been
20 pounds of headlines was the news section. It's great. It's perfect. There's something for every eventuality.
It's very good. It's a very good idea. So, yeah, Springsteen, he's now in France, on tour in France. And, the Chimes of Freedom with the live version of Chimes of Freedom, his live version of Chimes of Freedom with his diatribe about Donald Trump.
Yeah, it's an EP, isn't it? And he's put a recording of the thing, which I think he does every night, doesn't he? I think he's got that on an auto cue. You could see that he was really quite right because he wants it to be absolutely correct and to be transcribed and quoted, etc. And he's put that on the other side. So he is really he's not retreating on this, is it?
No,
he's almost baiting the president to respond. His only response, as far as I can see, apart from that original post calling him a kind of prune and untalented and all this unbelievably kind of kindergarten kind of level of response, was he put up a link. Did you see the thing with him hitting a golf ball and the golf ball hits Bruce Springsteen? Who then
it didn't. Oh my God!
That's the level of debate we're talking about here. That's the level of maturity.
So one thing you can guarantee about Donald Trump is if a prominent person has a go at him, he will respond because his skin is the thinnest on God's earth, as well, as well as the most orange. It's interesting that Springsteen should do this. Really, I've been thinking about this, but when you consider pretty much everybody else in the American entertainment business, he's very much keeping their heads down at the moment, aren't they? Because they're getting told by their kind of publishers or record companies or TV companies or whatever, please, God, don't rile this person because, we'll be subject to some IRS investigation or something. Something will be made difficult for us as a consequence. And he can't possibly believe that making the kind of statement he's made is going to change anybody's mind because, one thing we know is America is utterly divided and not amenable to argument on either side at all. But it does seem to me as if he's saying, I just want people to be clear where I stand. You know what I mean? That if this goes as badly as the predictions are, I want people to be able to look back on this year and go that I said what I said and made it absolutely clear where I stood. And, I think that's That's a kind of admirable thing to do.
I
really.
think it's completely admirable, and also he made such a stand during the election that people were expected a response from him. Because he was so outspoken, wasn't he? Do you remember that clip about which way you should vote? So he is required to respond, and I like the way that he's just dug in. And I think also it's to do with the fact that, how old is he now? 75, 76? I can't remember.
76, I think.
You're going to be thinking about your legacy. You're going to be thinking about how you'd like to be remembered, and you're going to really dig down on the things you particularly believe in and think represent you. And I admire that a lot, actually.
Yeah. Because it's had consequences beyond his own personal career. I note that a New Jersey bar band called, I think, No Surrender have had their regular Saturday night slot at some New Jersey bar cancelled because
they're worried about locals complaining.
Well, you see, it's interesting this, because I know it's a bit of a cliche, this idea of the kind of the poet of the blue collar American and so forth. But the blue collar American has voted for Trump in pretty large numbers, hasn't it? Really, And I've always thought it was the case that if you get beyond a certain level of popularity, your audience, you have no reason to believe your audience is any more uniform in their political, religious, or whatever views than any other bunch of people.
They can't be.
They can't be.
Because of the sheer number of them.
Absolutely.
Their diversity.
And it will be interesting to see whether he continues doing this in the United States, because obviously he made a point of starting this in the UK and in Europe. And
also Trump has basically said, wait till you get home.
Yeah.
I mean, there's the kind of hollow threats, but that's kind of almost implying there might even be problems at customs. I don't know.
Well, that's what some people are. That kind of thing's been seriously talked about, isn't it?
It has.
People talking about
dissenters are already having a tough time on a far, far lower level.
Yeah. So, talking of, in other veterans news.
Oh, Billy Joel.
Billy Joel, my goodness.
That's a sad old story.
He's cancelled his upcoming concerts because he has, I've got to get this right, normal pressure hydrocephalus.
There's problems of hearing, vision, and balance.
It's all pretty basic stuff.
Occurs from inside the brain, disrupting certain brain-related functions. It's been made worse by the performance. And what I didn't realise was just how much he's been working, actually.
Oh, he never stopped.
We talked about this on the podcast before about his commuting by helicopter.
Well, he finally, that was his Madison Square Garden Saturday night residency, which he did for years, and he stopped earlier this year, I think. That was his final one, or maybe last year. But he was coming to the UK. He's supposed to be here next month. And he was playing Manchester Co-op and Dublin 3 Arena and then Twickenham Stadium in London. I mean, that's a big old place, And
those are the ones he did last year, weren't they?
Were they? Really?
I think that's what he did last year.
Oh, yeah, God, I'm reading the wrong thing off.
I think he did.
Okay. But the point is, I couldn't get over the scale of gigs he was playing when you consider that he last had a chart hit in the UK in 1993. That's a long old time ago, that is,
It is, and he wasn't universally. I mean, he's one of those people like Meatloaf, who was really big on the east of America, the east coast of America, but not that big on the west coast. So there was a slight division, wasn't there, in terms of loyalty?
I suppose so, but I mean, in the UK, it is kind of amazing, that people would flock along to hear somebody play Uptown Girl and Just the Way You Are and so forth. And you could say how long ago those records were, and I suppose just people's memory is longer than we think, I suppose. You always used to think that if it was hits from 2 years ago, nobody would remember them. Well, these are hits from 35 years ago. But I suppose it indicates how the kind of radio landscape has changed massively, hasn't it? You have stations just just playing that stuff all the time. So more and more people are familiar with those tunes all the time. Anyway.
But also getting older, the thing that happened 2 years ago is going to be less important ultimately than the thing that happened 50 years ago, because you're concentrating so much on your past, aren't you?
I suppose so.
Rebooting particular phases of your life, and that's where Billy Joel might come in. I don't know.
So anyway, we wish Billy Joel well.
This is Word in Your Ear. What are you planning to do with all these records?
I was talking to an old publishing pal of mine the other day who said how valuable the two big rock and roll book clubs are in terms of sales, especially for fiction, which is, of course, really hard to sell because you often don't know the author and you certainly don't know the story. And those two book clubs, which I've been looking at actually, one is the Florence Welch book club, which she started in 2012. It's called Between the Books. And the other is Dua Lipa's Service 95 book club. And I think they're really interesting, actually. So Florence Welch has regular guest recommendations from Nick Cave and Fiona Apple. She has 147,000 followers on Instagram, and the current favourite book is Parable of the Sower by Octavia Butler. But she has a little reading list of things that she recommends all the time, which is really interesting and really broad. It has a Confederacy of Dunces, The Day of the Triffids, Great Gatsby, The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt, Patti Smith's Just Kids, etc. Salt, great book. It's kind of like, it's also a way of defining your identity, isn't it? It's a bit like, do you remember Word of Mouth we used to have in Word magazine, where people talk about 5 favourite records and 5 favourite books and 5 favourite films? It's a way of kind of broadcasting your personality, as it were. Dua Lipa's one is pretty big. It's 434,000 followers on Instagram, but she does these interviews and these reels get 1.5 million views. She did one recently with Guadalupe Nettle, which got 1.1 million views, which is a lot. I know.
These names, can I just say, if we were doing a private eye kind of lampoon,
you would make it Guadalupe Nettle. No.
You would, and what is it? Octavia Butler, Parable of the Sower. You could just invent that stuff, couldn't you? Anyway?
You could.
No, it's extraordinary, and I suppose it indicates well, it's a bit like, I think we may have talked about it in the past, the phenomenon of book talk, which emerged during lockdown, really, and was and there's been quite a force in publishing. And I think if you go into a larger Waterstones or big bookshop, and they will even have a book talk table, and this particularly appeals to young women, probably young college-educated women, and it is very much propagated by people posting reels on Instagram of them enthusing about or being seen with particular books. And it's apparently been, classic examples of, it's fantasy. A lot of it it's fantasy. Light Lark by Alex Lester, Six of Crows by Lee Bardugo. This is good.
It's good Stack Waddy material.
Stack Waddy material.
Are they real?
Which of these is made up?
I know.
A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. And The Songs of Achilles by Madeline Miller. But it's absolutely extraordinary. If you go and look on TikTok or on Instagram or whatever, you get thousands of these posts of as I say, largely young women, flaunting their collection of books, and I kind of feel that a part of it. I mean, I'm sure it's part of consumption of any kind of cultural item. It's just same thing with records. If people like being seen with them, don't they?
I think so. It's just like records, isn't it? We talked about this in the past about record shops that are basically antique shops.
Yes.
You know, they have copies of Bitch's Brew or or
it's always that in the window, isn't it? Yeah,
kind of blue, exactly. You know, or Exile on Main Street, or Dusty in Memphis, or Marquee Moon, or whatever. There are certain records which just indicate. They're lovely covers, and people have them scattered around the house just to give an impression, as the way they do books. I was in a cafe the other day in West London, and all around this cafe were Penguin Modern Classics, which we encourage to take out and read. They look largely unread, but they are beautiful objects. And they just sort of say something about you. They're comforting, but they are antiques in a way.
I tell you what, the other strand in this is quite interesting, and it's probably influenced this over a period of time. My wife is a teacher, and once a year she gets up in a very bad mood because she has to dress up for National Book Day.
Oh, National Book Day, yeah.
And she's just done this for years. And we always end up having the same conversation, How was National Book Day? Oh, they all turned up as Harry Potter or God knows what, witches or everybody was very happy. All the parents very full of themselves and so forth. I always say, did anybody read a book as a consequence? Oh, no. There's none of that.
Your relationship with books is interesting, isn't it? If it starts off with the idea of it being an excuse to dress up as
that's what I'm
a
saying.
wizard. It's really odd. I was reading something the other day where they were saying that that even Harvard students were saying that they found these are people who got into Harvard.
Can't read a book.
Finding it pressurized to be able to read more than one book a week. I thought this is really astonishing,
Well, it's not astonishing at all. I never know what to make of this, because literacy levels have gone down by every measure, and yet, Harry Potter, she sold millions of books to young people. Presumably, some of them have been read. I was on the Docklands Light Railway on Monday, coming back from from Spain, and there were two kids going home from school. They're being picked up by their mother, and I would say they're about 10 or something. They're twins, actually. I would say they're about 10. They had a junior school uniform on. And they were both, I thought it was extraordinary in Britain in 2025. They were both carrying violin cases and both reading horrible histories. You know what I mean? While standing up on the tube.
Oh, that's brilliant.
And they genuinely were.
And everybody around them was scrolling furiously.
Yes, absolutely.
Scrolling.
So,
oh, bless them.
Yeah, I don't know what to make of this kind of thing. But
it's just interesting how much people recommend, the value of recommendation. I was looking at Britney Spears' reading list she puts out all the time. Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. Whiskey in a Teacup by Reese Witherspoon. But I noticed one by Corey Taylor of Slipknot. I thought his recommended list was terrific. It was The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. Fear and Loathing on the Campaign Trail 1972 by Hunter S. Thompson. I mean, fair enough. Good work. Obviously not involved in having to campaign about, modern fiction. That's just what he's reading.
Well, yeah, I never know how much reading people in bands do, because they're constantly in a state of being distracted, aren't they? The phone has occupied that space, that where people just used to read a bit in between things, didn't they? It's where they used to read magazines. Actually, they read them on the tube or whatever, because a magazine feature was perfect to read on the tube because it would take, 15 minutes of your time or whatever, which is approximately your journey. And it probably didn't require massive concentration in the sense that you didn't have to think where you got to in the story. You didn't have to remind yourself and so forth. And, but the thing that has ended up occupying that same time now is the phone. It's the doom scroll, as they call it,
But doesn't that affect all of us? If we're watching a program where there's got a commercial break, I noticed that both my wife and I immediately just pick up our phones, just check to see if there's been any messages or anything like that. Before, I don't know what you do. You'd turn the volume down and you'd have a conversation. We'd go and put the kettle on or do something, but it's just an automatic reaction.
I don't know. I don't think you ever turned the volume down and had a conversation. You didn't turn to your wife and say, let's have a conversation.
No, I mean, turn the volume down on the ads because...
Oh, right. Yeah, well, maybe. But anyway, anybody who's doing their bit for book sales, it should be applauded.
Absolutely.
And, when I go into bookshops, I go to Watson's Piccadilly the other day and Daunt's in Marylebone High Street and so forth. And they're packed. They're full of people, People appear to be buying things. Whether they're reading them or not, I don't know, but they're certainly buying them, So I'm all in favour of that.
Can I just mention a book that we're going to be talking about soon, which is Stuart McConey's book.
Oh yeah, right.
It's called "With a Little Help from Their Friends" about the Beatles. The Beatles changed the world, but who changed theirs? I got a copy of it yesterday and just started reading it. It's so fascinating. We have this conversation all the time, Dave, about how much we know about the Beatles, and yet you always learn more. And one of the many things I've already learned in reading this, which has just a small chapter each on people who were part of the Beatles story, is that they had 18 drummers. Now, I didn't know that. Pete Best was the 17th drummer. He was the penultimate drummer. But before that, in total, if you add up every single person who played with the Quarrymen or the Silver Beatles or whatever, even for one night, they had 18 drummers. And two of those were brilliant. One's a guy called Tommy Moore, who has this disastrous night when he supports them on the Johnny Gentle tour because the drummer's fallen out and they need someone just for one night. And there's a little accident on the way in the van, and I think he loses one of his front teeth in the accident. And this poor old guy has to go to hospital. I think he's actually unconscious for a while. He's then dragged out of a hospital bed, missing teeth, and has to perform. When they go around the next 2 days later to pick him up, his girlfriend opens the window and tells him to piss off. He said he's not playing with you anymore. And the other guy is a guy called Johnny Hutchinson. And Hutch plays with them about 2 or 3 times. And then Epstein takes him aside and says, no, it was Alan Williams actually in those days, and says, look, the boys would like you to join the group. He says, I wouldn't do that even for a big clock, which was apparently a Liverpool expression, which is brilliant. The idea that whatever you did for your entire life, at the end of it, you might get a big clock. He said, I wouldn't do that for a big clock.
Brilliant.
And then spent the rest of his life going, shit.
So it's been a bit active on the drummers front this week, hasn't it? With drummers leaving and joining the Who and so forth. Are you across all this, as they say?
Well, there's the Zach Starkey story. We talked about that before. Where Zach Starkey appeared to have been sacked, and then he appeared to have been reinstated by the Who, and then he appeared to have been sacked again. And they told him that could he put out some kind of post saying that he wanted to go off and concentrate on his. There was too much conflict juggling his duties with the band and other endeavours, and he wanted to make it clear that he had got some other endeavours, but they weren't important. The main one was the Who, But it made me feel that everything now is so public, isn't it? Nobody can leave anything without posting their side of the story. Before, people would just sort of disappear. Okay. And the other one was John Freese, who was the drummer. He's been the drummer for the last 2 years in the Foo Fighters, and who posted a load of suggestions about why he might have been let go, which I thought were really quite funny, actually. One was it because of his metronome-like precision behind the drum kit, which had been deemed soulless, that he could only name one Fugazi song, that he never once tried growing a beard, that he didn't show up to the studio because Mercury was in retrograde, and he demanded starting every rehearsal with a 20-minute cowbell sound bath, which is, you've got to admit, he's taken it in good humour. But again, same thing, is that whatever happens, whatever altercation happens now, people post about it, don't they? This is my side of the story.
There is something unfailingly comic about the firing of a drummer, isn't there, really, that that doesn't apply to the firing of a bass player or anybody else, does it? Because musicians' lore is teeming with jokes about the incompetence of drummers or the failures of drummers to what is it? What's the old thing about drum machine? You only have to punch the
information
instructions
in once.
once. All that kind of
What do
stuff.
you call a drummer without a girlfriend? Homeless. It's all that kind of thing, isn't it? Anyway,
Somebody who hangs around with the musician, a drummer, all that. It just is always funny. We fired the drummer. Of course. It used to happen absolutely all the time when bands got recording contracts, didn't it? Because for the first time, they went into the studio and had to do two sides of a 45 RPM single in 3 hours. And if the drummer couldn't keep time, it was immediately apparent to absolutely everybody. And so that's why Pete Best was fired from the Beatles in the early days, because George Martin said he's not good enough, and similar happened with bands throughout history until the arrival of automated percussion, and then they no longer need to worry about it. No longer
arose.
They fix it all in the mix. So more drummers news as we have it.
This is Word in Your Ear. Down the rock and roll rabbit hole since 2007.
Did you follow the story of the Cannes Film Festival's ban on what they call nude fashion? That they'd issued an edict that, starlets, because it generally applies to starlets, were no longer being encouraged to appear in front of the photographers at Cannes events and premieres wearing hardly any clothes, which is...
Yeah, hardly any clothes, and also voluminous outfits, in particular those with a large train that hinder the proper flow of traffic of guests and complicated seating in the theatre.
It's traffic management as well, isn't it? It's trying to get people in there. But what this did to me is it reminded me of just what an integral part of the whole marketing, effort around a movie is the turning up for the photographers at the premiere. It's just absolutely fundamental. And it sent me back to this extraordinary story that people may have come across it. If not, they ought to go and acquaint themselves with it. Kate Beckinsale, the actress, she talked about...
terrible story, isn't it?
She talked about how she was appearing in a film that happened to be produced by Harvey Weinstein. And it came out in the wake of 9/11. And obviously there was very little going on in show business for a couple of months or whatever following those events. But then they decided they were going to have a premiere. And she, with her fellow cast members, decided it would be in bad taste to turn up at this kind of, with half your body hanging out or whatever. And so she turned up in a trouser suit or something. And then Harvey Weinstein subsequently asked her over to his house on the pretensions of having a play date with their two children, which is just too grotesque to go to. And then sends a child away or whatever, and just lays into Kate Beckinsale and basically makes it clear that your job as an actress on this film is, well, all right, you got to turn up and make the film. You got to, on these days and so forth. And there's the script and there's the costumes.
But a big part of it is you've got to go out.
Huge part of this.
Be attention grabbing on the red carpet.
Absolutely.
Get on the front of the papers.
Absolutely. The papers. And if you don't do this, you are, guilty of dereliction of your duty, of your part of this contract. Is absolutely extraordinary. Of course it is. I mean, Harvey Weinstein is clearly the most, repellent manifestation of this tendency. But this tendency is obviously, it's held by everybody in the industry, isn't it? That they completely accept this, that movies get their kind of prominence by their association with largely young, attractive actresses who are also
way of looking at it. Actually,
but it isn't. It's more new fashioned than anything, actually. Because those people sort of accept and kind of embrace the fact that they are not just an actor; they're also a fashion plate. They kind of like that. They get very well paid to be a fashion plate.
Well, the economics of it are really fascinating, and I don't know. I don't know the full details, but clearly actors I don't think are paid to be on the red carpet, but their expenses tend to be paid for by the brands that they wear and endorse. And so presumably that's handsomely paid, far more than the expenses actually would be. So in fact, you're making money, aren't you, by wearing whatever you...
Well, also then, you know, if you can get just about every top line film actress nowadays will also be the kind of the face of something, some cosmetics brand or some fashion brand or so forth, or the official spokesperson for so-and-so. And they're advertising deals, you know. These people they're advertising hoardings. They're mobile advertising hoardings.
Yeah, absolutely.
Onto which people can put their product.
But the other complication is the influencers. So you've got influencers invited to be on the red carpet in order for them to publicise the movie and to publicise Cannes. And they're people not actually in the film at all. Those tend to be the people who are wearing the voluminous dresses. They're wearing these massive, great things in order to just make as much of an impression as possible and to make sure that they get photographed. And that's complicated too, because it's possible that they may have to pay to be on the red carpet. It's also possible that they're then paid to post about it. So God knows how complicated all that is, but you can see it's quite difficult.
So, side notes to all this, you know, which I do find myself thinking once a year: is Hollywood all over, Mark? Is it dead? You know, do you know I've got the top 10 films worldwide this year? Okay, and Ner-Za 2, a Minecraft movie, Captain America: Brave New World, Thunderbolts, Sinners, Snow White, Dogman, Bridget Jones' Mad About the Boy, Mickey 17, and Final Destination: Bloodlines. Now, have you gone to a party recently where anybody's engaged you in conversation
Someone
about
come running up and said, what do you think of Ner-Za 2? What do you think of Thunderbolts? It's terrible. Bridget Jones' Mad About the Boy is the only one I'm fully aware of, actually. 138 million, which is not an enormous amount, is it? Is that a lot?
I don't know. Well, you can't look at the grosses really, because the prices go up all the time. So all it's doing is reflecting inflation. But I can't help thinking if you'd taken the top 10 films from 20 years ago, there would have been films that people talked about, you know. But I don't know if the same thing applies.
It's exactly like music, though, isn't it? The little self-contained communities that go off, as we've talked about this a lot about, you know, the people selling out giant stadia in Britain who we've not heard of because you're not constantly aware of the fact they're not on the radio, they're not on, there's no Top of the Pop. You know, there's all those things which made everything ubiquitous don't exist anymore. They just they're in their own little self-contained universe.
Yeah. I suppose they're all in silos. So I don't know if this is a temporary state of affairs or that is just the future. That's the way things are. Anyway, is Hollywood dead? We look forward to your thoughts.
You're listening to Word in Your Ear, cheaper than therapy, and you can walk the dog at the same time.
So that's about it for this week. Remind me, Mark, what have we done in the last week?
Well, we've put up the interview, I think, with David Leaf, who wrote a terrific book about Smile, the Lost Beach Boys album. That's well worth hearing. We did Dylan Jones, our old pal, who's written a book about 1975 and its an impact and influence. And that'll be up soon. And we're going to talk to Budgie, not Burke Shelley of Budgie, but Budgie, the drummer of Susie and the Banshees.
Absolutely. Next
week, and Martha Wainwright. So, and various other things in the pipeline.
And if you want to keep abreast of all of it, and you want to know how you can get it first, and you can get it in full stereophonic, deep pile stereo and glowing colour, you might like to consider becoming a Patreon supporter. How do I do that, you ask? Well, I'll tell you. You go to patreon.com/wordinyour-ear for more details, and we'll see you the other side.
This podcast was brought to you by The Word.